What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the eCommerce Influence Podcast. My name is Austin Brawner, and I am thrilled to bring you this episode today with one of my good friends, John Pinto. John is the founder of BoomBoom Naturals. He's been a friend for over 10 years. We met and got our start together working at a company called Human Healthy Vending, which was really our first job out of college. Both John and I were in sales. John was actually the first employee at this company. I was the third, and we were on a crazy rocket ship ride. I think when I left, we had gone from like $100,000 in sales to over 10 million in a couple of years. And we sat right next to each other. We shared a desk and got to know each other really well. In this episode, we talk about his journey with BoomBoom, what he has learned going direct to consumer and acquiring over 500,000 customers through Facebook and online marketing, and how he's recently shifted and had a lot of success going into big national retail chains and what he's learned. So we also talk about like life balance, being an entrepreneur, having kids, and what that looks like. John's one of the most balanced people that I know and has a great head on his shoulders and shares some of his ideas and kind of hacks around how he's been able to keep that going while building a very large growing company. So it's an excellent interview. I think you're going to love it. So welcome John to the show. Johnny, welcome to the show.
What's up? How are you doing, Austin?
I'm doing great. I'm so excited to have you back on. I believe you've been on one time before, but it's really always fun to catch up with you and hear what's been going on. It's so funny because what nobody knows who listens to this podcast is at one point, Johnny and I shared a desk right next to each other, maybe for 6-8 months, maybe even a year, where every day we'd show up and we had next to each other on the desk, working out, doing all the things, seeing each other every day. So it's always fun to reconnect with you and see how you are doing.
I know, man. Seems literally like a lifetime ago, but it was the start of my career right out of college, and definitely the most memorable, very memorable few years. That's for sure. I never thought giving away healthy vending machines would be so hard. I think people would want a free healthy vending machine, but easier said than done.
It's true. Yeah, we had years where we spent literally calling people, school districts, hospitals, and our whole goal was to give them a healthy vending machine and replace their junk food vending machine for free. That was our sales pitch. I think like part of it was because it was free. People were just like, what the hell is going on here?
Yeah. Like, what's the catch? Yeah. The vending industry is a wild place. You realize quickly how big some of those players are in that space. Coke, Pepsi, Canteen, all the big food service companies, and they're not messing around. They'll come by scoreboards and redo football fields and stuff, and we really couldn't offer too much other than a free vending machine.
I remember going to because both Johnny and I worked for this company called Human Healthy Vending, and at one point we were both on the road for a significant period of time, flying around, meeting with school districts. I remember going on a road trip to Atlanta and going to these huge high schools and trying to convince them to get rid of the Coca-Cola vending machines and put in some healthy options. And that's like pure Coca-Cola territory down there, right? Like That's the headquarters. They're firmly entrenched. All the scoreboards, the school's sponsored by Coca-Cola. And I was like, to one of these principals, like, what could we do that would make it so it was, worthwhile? He's like, well, I get like $1,000 a month in just slush money from Coca-Cola. Can you give me that money? We're like, no, we don't have profits from selling sugar water. We both kind of made a transition after that, and you went on to take over this company BoomBoom, and we both went into the e-commerce space. BoomBoom has evolved and changed quite a bit since you started it, since we are working on it together. What would you describe BoomBoom now as? How do you describe it to people, for people who don't know what it is?
Yeah. So BoomBoom Naturals, we have one flagship product, and it's a daily use nasal stick. So you basically, it's a little tube similar to like the same delivery mechanism as like an old school Vicks inhaler. You put it up your nose, give it a nice smell, and it's very invigorating. It's very refreshing. It supports and reinforces nasal breathing. So we have a lot of people using it to remind themselves to consciously breathe through their nose throughout the day, which is obviously very important. There's a lot of, kind of new science coming out around all of that now, especially with James Nestor's new book. So the product itself it's a blend of peppermint oil, eucalyptus oil, spearmint, menthol. We have different scents, tropical, mint, winter mint. So it's definitely a very unique, novel thing for people here in the US to kind of pick up and use as like a daily use product. But that is the vision, that is the goal. We feel like it has a place on the shelf in every single retailer, and that's what we're working on right now.
You say in the US, where it's Thailand where it's quite popular. Where is it really popular? Like, where are these sorts of things ingrained in people's habits?
Yeah, so Southeast Asia, Thailand specifically, there's probably 3 or 4 brands that are sold in every single corner store, every convenience store. And it is part of culture there. I mean, people literally have them in their pocket, in their purse. They're using them, as part of their morning routine after they brush their teeth. They're using them maybe on their way to work. They're using them at work. Really ingrained in culture, in Asian culture. There's also in Russia, there's a very similar product that I know people are using regularly, but not so much here in the US. When people think about nasal products in the US, they're thinking about, oh, I'm sick. Oh, I'm stuffed up. I have allergies.
Yeah, like a neti pot type thing.
Yeah, like a neti pot, or like a of the Vicks Vapo inhaler, or like some sort of like chest rub. So people don't realize that your sense of smell is really, really powerful and can have a big impact on how you feel. And so we're spending a lot of our time educating people on how all that works. And oh, by the way, we also have this really cool, unique item that helps you do that and do it in like a fun, easy way. And it's also a great product to, give as like a gift, or it's a talking point. I mean, it's so novel that like if you have one in your pocket, you kind of it ends up being in your hand, if like you're out at the bar, you just kind of like hold on to it. It's a very unique product, and it's always been that way. And that's why we have the momentum that we have, and why we're kind of just continuing to press on.
I'll share one of my first like connections with it was the same job I was talking about with, where we had a desk next to each other working for this company, Human. Right at the beginning, like my first week, they sent me to sales training, and I went to Jordan Belfort's sales training by LAX at the airport. This was before Wolf of Wall Street. This was like 10 years ago, maybe even longer than that. Yeah, it's got to be like 12 years ago now. And it was like, I think it was called the Straight Line Persuasion Boot Camp. And it was just like 2 days of him getting you so pumped up to sell. And the first day, I remember we're sitting down there, and he's like, all right, part of the sales process, you got to get anchored into your peak mental state. And so he gave everybody, passed around a BoomBoom, which is the product. And from on stage, he's like, everybody stand up, put it in your nose, and then you just rip this huge pull into your nose, and you think about the mental state you need to be in to go in and close a deal, like you're ready to like run through a brick wall. And he had hundreds and hundreds of people who had never even heard of this, ripping the BoomBoom, getting into peak mental state. And that was my introduction. I was like, okay, this is so interesting. And yeah, I mean that's what I think of when I think of boom, like the ability to change state, right? Like change state is fascinating. And then he's gone on also to become like Jordan Belfort. Now, a lot more people know him over the last 10 years from movies and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I have a funny little add-on to that. So yeah, Jordan had been like one of our earliest customers. We were just like shipping him tubes like without like proper packaging in bulk so he could do, share them at his events, which was awesome, And so I back in the day, this was probably 2016 or 2017, I was still like doing like customer service tickets, and out of all of a sudden I got like a few like customer service tickets saying, hey, I just read about Boom Boom in Jordan Belfort's new book. And I was like, what? And he just dropped his like new book, Way of the Wolf, or whatever it's called. And I buy it immediately on Kindle, and I go to search Boom Boom, and I kid you not, like he dedicates an entire chapter of that book to Boom Boom and how he uses it, and the term that he coined is like olfactory anchoring. And there's absolutely something to it. We don't go too deep on like the science on our end because we have to be careful with some of that, especially as we kind of push into retail. But yeah, a lot of different people are using the product for a lot of different reasons, which is exciting to see.
And I think what's so fascinating about your product is that because it's like a new category, and it can be polarizing in the sense that people don't know what it is, are skeptical, and then they can have a turning point moment where they become raving fans. Like it happens very quick. And someone like Jordan can go out and like literally push it to hundreds and thousands of people, tens of thousands of people through his book because he's so passionate about it. What have you learned about selling a product that is a new category that needs a lot of education? What are some of the things that you've learned from this process?
Well, kind of our marketing motto has been for the last couple of years is sticks in hands. Like we know that kind of that aha moment for most people with the product is when they actually put it in their nose and smell it, and then they go, oh, I get it. So for us, going out and being like at live events, for being at trade shows, giving out samples, like that has been like number one like priority for us, because we always find a few buyers or a few different people who are like, they get it, they like it, and they want to support it. But it's definitely, we've been direct to consumer for, many, many years. So we're like, okay, well, how do we get it out there? And it's been a lot of video, right? It's been a lot of very like probably unorthodox, like top of funnel marketing videos that are like, what the heck is this product? And it's more like curiosity driven versus like being like educational, which we're now finding, hey, like we probably need to have a mix of both. It needs to be very curiosity driving, but also it needs to have some education around it. And that's what people are kind of expecting online now. And one of our more like recent YouTube ads that worked really well was that combination of both. So the education component is hands down like the number one thing when creating this new category. I mean, people, they want to try it. They need to understand why it's going to help them. And that's been it's been a 6-year journey doing that so far.
Yeah. One of the more interesting things about starting a category or coming into something entirely new is the returns are so asymmetric, right? If you can create in somebody's mind a new category, then you get all the return. But it's such an uphill battle for hearts and minds to be able to educate people. I had Chris Mead on, who's the founder of CrossNet.
Yeah, I listened to that one. That's good.
Yeah, it's a similar sense where it's like a totally new game. And just like you said, sticks in hands, for them, it was like, we need people to play CrossNet. If people play CrossNet, boom. It's like a switch flips, and then they realize, oh, I want to play this game more, and I want to bring it to other people.
Yep.
And there's something so powerful about a product like that. And also the downside is that it's challenging.
Yes.
It's challenging to get sticks in hands, especially even if you're, Boom Boom is not that expensive. but it's still a hurdle for somebody to hop over.
Yeah. I mean, we send out a ton of free product. That's a big, with CrossNet, I was listening to that and I'm like, man, it's expensive. It's heavy to ship. You got to do this whole setup process. Like, man, that's tough. Like we literally have a small, lightweight item that we can ship out, all over the world, really. And that's a big part of our strategy too, is, micro influencers, like, again, like anybody, like reaching out through DM or Grin or whatever the case may be, sending the product out, really not expecting much in return because we just want to get the product out there. And it's definitely, that's been our strategy, since day one. I mean, I was DMing people on Instagram in 2016, sending stuff out. So it definitely works.
So you tell us a little bit about your journey in direct to consumer and the transition that you have made to retail. Like, I guess if you can give us kind of an overview, when did you shift your focus? It sounds like you shifted it to retail. When did that shift, and why did that happen for you?
We always knew going in, we wanted to go DTC. Like, let's prove the concept. Let's prove that people want this product, that like this product, that will reorder this product. And I would say we did that successfully. I mean, we've built it up to over like 500,000 customers, be it through Amazon or Shopify. But what we've realized is a couple of things. One, average order value online is very important. Obviously, we didn't really think too much about that in the early days. Like, it was really cheap to spend money online. The landscape was like a little bit different. And so, we were able to get some scale. We hit Shark Tank. We were viral, for like an entire year after that. Like, there was a lot of movement online, which was great. It was a little bit tough to see like kind of what was working and what wasn't. And over the last really couple of years, what we've realized is like, hey, we've discovered that BoomBoom is an impulse type of product, right? It is an item that it can sit in like the cold cough section next to the other nasal inhalers, but it also can be on a clip strip or at the checkout and, sell through with some of the best, most high turning items, on the shelf. So knowing that, we were like, okay, look, we've kind of built this online, what we kind of considered as like an awareness and sampling engine. Like, hey, let's run a break-even online business, basically, where we can kind of cover all of our costs, pay our team, spend efficiently, get the product out there while we start to really ramp this into retail. And that's kind of the model that we've been using over the last really 18 months. And retail has its challenges. I mean, it is no joke trying to break in with some of these big retailers, but we've put a lot of our attention and focus on that. And I think starting in 2019, we were probably in like 100 stores, and now we're in close to like 5,000. And I'd say about 80% of those customers are reordering, which is awesome. We have CVS for a couple thousand doors on the shelf, with 2 SKUs, which is amazing, right? And so we're looking to get the signals from the market though, like, hey, like, when are we going to get put nationwide with CVS, right? Like, is the data and the sell-through good enough compared to what else they're kind of tracking it against? And is our story, good enough to get them to give us that opportunity to be like, hey guys, this is the next big, like, everyday carry type of product, like chapstick, like gum, even like a lighter, right? It's like one of those things, you see it and then you buy it. You're not really going online to like reorder chapstick, right? I mean, maybe some people do, but most of them are seeing it and buying it at the store, which is kind of the big aha moment we've had over the last little bit. And, we are aggressively pushing into retail with, essentially no connections in retail. So we're forging those connections. We're paying to go to trade shows. We're working with a couple of brokers. And I've been learning a lot, like that's been the biggest thing for me is like, hey, we're continuing to learn and how to like break into retail. Like it is is difficult, So
So I want to talk about the time it's taken, because I know you've been pursuing these retail relationships for, I mean, how walk through, how long has it actually taken to get from desire to being in CVS? What does it look like?
oh man, yeah, CVS is like kind of like the example, right? And this is what I didn't know going into trying to break into retail. And I will say, I think retail is much more about who you know. Yes, you need to have a product that sells. You need to be able to get the sell through. Like that's without a doubt. But if your product does sell, like you also need to like have the right connections. And so those are some of the things that we've kind of uncovered over the last couple of years. But CVS, the journey with them, we basically sent 10 displays to 10 different CVS stores up in the Rhode Island area. And this was in probably 2000, end of 2019. Okay. Then the product sells. We're working with like the innovations team. The product sells through in the time frame that they needed it to sell through. I think it was like in like a 6-week period. Then they say, okay, like we want to test this on clip strips. It's a one-time buy. We're going to do that for 5,000 stores. I was like, wow, fantastic, right? That's a big order.
Yeah.
That was I think we shipped that the like Q1 or Q2 of 2020. And then we sold through that. And then we got connected with the cold cough allergy buyer. So this was the buyer where they're like, hey, we think this is going to fit best on the shelf next to the other nasal products. And I was like, okay, fine. Like I'd love to be in other areas of the store ultimately, but if this is where we need to start, done, right? So then we think we're going to be, kind of going in into all the stores, but no. Then they said, okay, we're going to put you in 2,000 stores on the shelf, and we shipped that in like middle of 2021. So, now I have meetings with those buyers at the beginning of next month, so 2022, with the hopes that we're going to get like a nationwide launch during the reset, which is going to happen in June or July or whatever. So yeah, it's been like 3 years,
Yeah.
and meanwhile, you're trying to work all these other deals and like get in other stores. And we've been successful in doing that to some extent, but you also got to realize like the other bigger players, they're going to look at what's working. They want data, right? Like Kroger was like,
Yeah.
no, we're passing. You have no data. So now we actually have some data. I'm kind of anxiously awaiting to see like, is that data good enough for them to go bigger? And I think the answer is yes. I'm confident it will be, but it's been an absolute beast of a process. And but again, like I said, I've been learning a lot, and that's really all you can ask for at this point. So,
Well, it sounds like the perfect job for the marinator. We used to, we used to call Johnny the marinator because his follow-up was so good. You'd have people that would be dragging their heels, and then the follow-up would happen. And like a year later, someone would come through. But it does sound like follow-up is so important in this ongoing kind of grind to get into these large accounts that could literally change your business overnight.
yes, yeah, and the other thing that I didn't really you don't really think about too much, but these big retailers, like they don't necessarily want to be working with single companies selling one or two SKUs. Like it's the same amount of work for them to do that versus working with some of these, maybe private equity company that has a platform of like 12 products in the space, and CVS brings in 8 of them, right? Like they don't necessarily want to be spending the time with kind of some of these smaller companies, but they also realize that that's where the innovation is. That's where they're going to find the new next hot thing. So they are willing to do it, but it's just, it becomes a little more of a process because they don't want to like put their neck out on the line either and go big with something and then show their category being stagnant or even going backwards, which, these buyers have like a fun job in some ways, right? Like they don't want to like bring in a bad item that doesn't sell. That's
Yeah.
big grounds for firing.
Yeah. It's interesting thinking about the psychology, like the psychology there that they are operating under is so different than the startup founder, right? Where it's like, okay, we want to get this thing, give it a try, see if it works, and then iterate off of that. They don't really want that. They want something that's like proven, already figured out,
Yeah.
and it's just something they can just plug in and not think about.
Yeah.
Risks don't really help them too much.
Exactly. Yeah. So we've been like laser focused on CVS, and we know that if we can make this work at CVS and the data looks good, we're going to be able to go to every other retailer and show them what we've done, and I think like, like Nielsen, the data company, like pegged us as like the fifth fastest growing upper respiratory company, like in that, in that category in 2020, which I'm like, cool. Like you need to get those retail scans. You need that data for like anybody to take you seriously, which at least in the retail space, direct to consumer is completely different. So it's been a a mindset shift for sure.
What have you learned about marketing in store? Is there anything that you guys do, or like that you had to change packaging? Thought about anything that you learned over this like trudge to get into retail?
Yeah, packaging for sure. We gone in circles. I mean, a few times. If I could go back in time, I would have really, really understood what packaging needs to how it needs to be packaged for your particular category in retail. Like those were things I wasn't thinking about back in the day when we were selling direct to consumer. And, meanwhile, you're sitting on tens of thousands of units of packaging that you need to sell. So that's a little bit challenging.
What do you mean by that? When you say it has to be packaged for the area, like what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so like one example is we had these little carton packs where we're like, hey, they sit flat on the table, right? So you don't necessarily need to have them hanging on something. They can be positioned anywhere. Well, we ended up getting those on clip strips in Albertsons, Vaughn's pavilions, and I'd go into the store and the carton would be like squished to the side and like the side of it's like popping open, and it's like that could have been avoided with a blister pack, having a nice clamshell sealed blister pack that shows the product. So we actually went back to blister packaging over the last year, which we did originally. And so it's like those little things that you don't necessarily know until you see your product in the store and you're like, ooh, like it's a little bit of a tough pill to swallow, but a lot of lessons learned for sure.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like that's kind of where it's like the institutional knowledge that you pick up in going into wholesale around things that you just wouldn't expect matter, and then you realize, oh, actually this makes a huge difference.
And even like how the cases are packed and going directly to the retailers. Like we have our master cases now have these little 6-unit counter displays with 4 of them in there, 24 units, right? Like that makes sense if you're shipping on pallets to retailers because they can just drop a case off or 2 and they're not sitting on a bunch of inventory. It's like they don't want to be holding a bunch of inventory. Whereas before we had these 12 by 12 unit master cases for 144 units. Like those work well for a distributor who's going to go and break those down and send them into these different stores. Doesn't really work for a Kroger or, some big grocery channel that just wants a case delivered because they're going to keep it in the back and it's all going to hit the shelf at the same time.
Sure. Makes sense.
So like those things again, like took me way too long to like really figure out, but it is what it is, and in store. Yeah. So what we do in store now, there's a couple of things we do. We do add like online advertising to get people into retail. So we have a budget basically per like PO of like, hey, we're willing to spend, 5% of this PO on video ads saying now available at CVS, and we'll kind of drop them to our store locator and geo-target the ads accordingly. Hard to track. I mean, I gotta believe it's doing something. I don't know.
Yeah.
We don't spend a ton of money because it's like we can't track it and it's a little bit tough, but we do look at like the overall like spend versus POs coming in from CVS. So there's a little bit of a gauge there. But then we also have we call it like our street team. So we literally have probably 4 or 5 people all around the country that drive around and go and hit all these stores, and they go, they make sure it's on the shelf. They give samples to the clerks, explain to them, hey, like what it is, give them the product, again, sticks in hands. Like some of these people working at these stores can become your best salespeople if they like the product and they like you. So
Sure.
hard. That has been really effective, but it's also really challenging to do that on like a national scale, as like a bootstrap startup. So, we're starting to like think like, hey, do we want to just go really deep in like the Los Angeles and Las Vegas market, have somebody go around and literally like know every single person at all of these stores, and then give us really like boots on the ground feedback of like, hey, here's what's actually happening. Like product's not on the shelf. It hasn't been reordered for a while. They haven't seen it there. Like those are things you just don't know as the brand. Like you have no clue. You're just relying on these distributors and retailers to get the product up. And a lot of times they don't, honestly. So
That seems like it's nice because you can do it in one market and then just extrapolate that throughout the country.
exactly. And that's how you really, I was talking to the CEO of More Labs, who's Josh, who's been super helpful and definitely somebody I've been like bouncing ideas off of. And yeah, he was like, if you really want to build the brand and in a market, like you got to go really deep and you got to be everywhere. And then you can see like, hey, does the billboard advertising work? Does, you can really, really test the market and see what works and what doesn't. And then, like you said, kind of rinse and repeat in other markets. So we're getting a little bit more sophisticated in kind of our approach, but it's we're also like, we want to be in every CVS too. So it's, you got to kind of play both sides, and it's going to unfold how it's going to unfold, I guess.
Sure. Well, kind of switching gears, one of the things I want to talk to you about is one of the things I've noticed from, knowing you, being your friend for over a decade now, is your ability to prioritize the things that matter to you outside of work. Whether that's health, relationships, marriage, being a father, you've got 2 kids. How do you think about it? Like, how do you stay balanced, if you even use that term, in a world that really has a lot of external factors pushing you to do more, work harder, work longer, all these different things?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think back to like the human days where I had no balance and I was like grind. And I think there's a time and place for that, especially when you're young and you're right out of college and you're learning and it's fun and this and that. And so, but I also learned a lot from going through that process. Like going through that process, I actually, became fairly unhealthy. Like, I was a college basketball player. I was always working out. I was pretty dialed in, kind of almost forced to be dialed in, because when you're playing a sport, you got your practices, you have to be kind of
show up.
Yeah, you got to show up, right? And so when I got out of school and was just working all the time, like the number one thing I struggled with was figuring out how to work out by myself. Like I literally would go to the gym and it would just be like a half-ass workout. And I'm like, this is just not me. Like, what is going on? And that went on for, 4 years probably, and ended up getting like fairly unhealthy, having some like random weird kind of symptoms that like brain fog and just like not feeling that good. And, I kind of went down the health and wellness rabbit hole and just really opened my eyes to like, wow, like, okay, I focused in for like a good 6 months on like all things diet and food related, and started hitting more of like a group workout class that I realized is like, whoa, I actually need this. I need other people like telling me what to do in the workout. I'll do it. I will literally do any workout anybody tells me. I just need them there telling me what to do. So I figured I learned that, and that was game changing for me. And then,
and that was that Orange Theory?
that was Orange Theory. Yeah. Orange Theory.
Yes, I remember the Orange Theory because you were on it. I didn't see you for like maybe 6 or 8 months,
Yep.
and I saw you, and it was like a transformation. I was like, "Damn, dude, you've gotten ripped over like
Yeah.
half a year or a year."
Yeah, it was wild. I mean, and the what started that was like these weird random, health symptoms that I'm like, this is not normal to be experiencing this as like a 27-year-old. Like something's got to change. And it was, a combination of food and stress and partying and whatever else, right? So lots learned there. Like I have a few like mentors in the health space that like I read their books and they changed my life. And like those are the people that I refer to for my health and wellness, references and guides really. And so when all that was kind of like unfolding, Chelsea, my wife, got pregnant. And so, I mean, having a kid, as you will soon maybe know. Do people know?
Yeah, yeah. I don't know if I publicly said on the podcast, but
Well,
I know I've announced it on Instagram. So yes, I'm having a kid.
oh God, I was literally like, wow, did I just totally like blow that? Oh man. Okay, well, as you'll soon know,
Yeah,
the crazy thing about having kids is it immediately like yes, you have less hours in the day to like get work done, but what it does is it immediately snaps your priority list like into motion of like what actually matters. And so, yeah, like I was up really early with the baby, and yeah, you're up at night, but like the hours you do have for work related activities get really, really clear and really, really focused.
yeah.
And so I just latched onto that, and I really do my best to not get sucked into the weeds too much on things that just like aren't high leverage or things that I should be focused in on. And, I've got a great team who, I am totally like, who's totally capable of like handling most of the things that I once was doing, early in the early days of the business. So it's an interesting thing, as a business owner and as an entrepreneur, like I have this vision and I know where the business is going. And a part of it is all timing, right? And so the timing of like where I think I should be versus where I am may not be in alignment, but I also have all of these other things I have going on in my life that I wouldn't trade for the world, right? Like I have an amazing home and wife and family, and we have, all these great things happening. And it's like, I always just got to remember to enjoy the ride. And like, that's been the biggest thing for me is like not to get so obsessed with like the work all the time, because it's always going to be there. And if the whole retail thing the one thing it has taught me is like, you have to be patient. Like you don't have a choice but to be patient breaking into retail. It's just, that's the only option. So like I could sit here and get all worked up about, oh, we should be in more stores or we should be doing this. But like the reality is like, we are where we are.
It's like, what are you going to do? You can't go to each individual retail store and pitch the clerk.
Yeah, exactly. So it's,
Yeah.
and then I think just the other main thing for me is like my mornings. We get the kids ready. We have somebody that helps with the baby during the day, and then Peter's at school. And like the first hour of my day is like just very dialed in. It's a workout. It's having some sort of healthy smoothie or like a bulletproof coffee or something to kind of like try to like just not eat a bunch in the morning. And then I meditate. And then I basically roll right into my day at like 9 a.m. And like, if I hit that in the morning, it's like the whole day just falls into place. And like, that's been like the number one thing for me. It's just that consistency around that. And, some days are better than others, but like, I know all this stuff. It's just, it is wild. It's like, it's all habit, and when you get in the right habits, it's, it can change everything. And that's what I've experienced, in my life for sure.
Yeah. Well, I think it's simple, but it's hard, right? It's simple, but it's not easy to be consistent and find the time to do those things that most people know. Right. But why isn't it every single day? Well, because it's simple, but it's not easy.
Yeah.
And I was inspired to, it's beginning, we're recording this. So at the beginning of the new year, I was inspired to go back through and read James Clear's Atomic Habits again. It's a book that I've like read in the past and enjoyed it, and then went back through it. And so much of what he talks about are just trying to take the things that you want to do and break them down into like small little things that you can be repetitive with and that you won't fail with, right? Like I find that that's my biggest challenge. And as I've gotten older, I've learned to set smaller goals that are more possible to actually achieve versus these like really big ones where I'll fall off the wagon pretty quick, right? Maybe it's just like doing a small workout or something very, very little. I would love to hear, you mentioned a couple people or books that you read that changed your health journey. Do you remember what those were?
The main one that really like set it off for me was The Autoimmune Fix by Dr. Tom O'Brien. A lot of people have autoimmune issues, like underlying autoimmune stuff that they don't necessarily even know they have. When I read that book, I was like, holy, like this book is like literally, he's talking to me, And so
yeah,
I went all in on that. After I read that, I went all in and I was like, all right, I'm in. And it was hard. I mean, it was really hard. You're meal prepping and not eating anything processed. I mean, it's like a crazy thing, but I woke up one day, probably after about 2 months of being kind of on this like plan, and I kid you not, I felt like a new human. And it was almost like a light switch. It literally like something like turned off or on in my brain, whatever you want to call it, where I was like, whoa, like this is how I should be feeling every day. So that book, and then all of like Dave Asprey's stuff, like he's in terms of like just like the fasting, and like I basically try not to eat in the morning, and I think he's got a good message too, and the dude is
human optimization.
Yeah, he's I would always hit his little like cafe in Santa Monica when I used to live over there, and it's just the little things that I think add up over time. And then Mark Hyman stuff, Dr. Mark Hyman, he's always got a good message around food, and I think that what it comes down to is, at least in my eyes, is like food. What are you putting in your body every single day? And that's going to directly correlate to like how you're feeling. And people just don't realize like how gross most of the food is today. And you got to actually like take some time to like think about what you're putting in your body. And so, yeah, those were the few kind of main people. And also both my parents are like holistic chiropractors, naturopaths. So I kind of grew up with all that, and it was, which is why it was kind of funny to kind of lose my way for a few years and then start feeling like, shit. And then you come back and you're like, whoa, like, I guess they were right,
I have a similar take on my own. I mean, we were both working so hard in that first job and grinding so hard. It was like a culture of grinding that I took away a very similar thing as you, where there was realization that there's like a time and a place for that. And I think often that's in your 20s, and it's when you're learning, and maybe you can fast forward and learn how to actually run a business or do business or conduct these things. But then at a certain point, it becomes counterproductive, right? Mm-hmm. And I think that is an interesting transition point where you realize, wow, like what the stories that I told myself about work no longer serve me at all. And I'm actually holding myself back from like richer relationships, holding my business back from growth because I'm decided I'm going to like carry too much of a load and not progressing and not going to the next level. One of my like intentions and goals for this year is to change the story and energy that I have around work, especially exploring new things. I think one of the stories that I've had for a long time is like when I try something new or I explore something new, I have to go into it with like reckless, like abandon for, to like dive all in on it and work on it constantly.
Yeah.
When I don't even know if that's even necessary or if it's actually good, right? Where maybe if I can somehow change the way that I show up in my energy, that I will attract enough people around me that also want to be involved in this, that the project can move faster together rather than just me being like a grinder on it, you know?
I know. Yeah, that resonates a lot with me too. So it is. It's like one of those things where, especially as like in doing the whole entrepreneur thing, like at least for me, like you hold on to things for too long. Like I've held on to a lot of things in the business for far too long, and like as soon as I like can finally be like, okay, there's other people that are way more qualified and are better off doing this. Like they just like appear, and it's like, oh, like this just happened recently with the guy who does like a lot of our kind of like back end, like web dev stuff. He like hit me up over winter break. And he's like, hey, John, like, I love like the company culture. I love what you guys are building. Like, I want to get more involved in doing stuff just outside of like Shopify dev stuff. And like, come to find out this guy's like a supply chain, like EDI, like connoisseur who is like exactly who we need as we scale into retail. And I'm like, yes, like I was just talking to Tyler about us getting this person in the mix. And like, as soon as you're like ready to like really dive in and figure some of these things out, there's usually somebody that will come into your world that is probably way better at it than you can ever be. And it's more fun when you're working with people like that anyways. So
it is, but it's wild how that happens, because I feel like I'm continually going through a process of letting go of what where I think that things should go and what timeline. And then there's like this fear of, okay, if I make this decision or let go of this, then I'm not going to be able to find this person. So it's going to be really, really hard. But really, it's like the moment when I let go of it is when that person, like you said, that person appears or that thing happens, because I don't know what it is. Your consciousness starts looking for these types of people. Mm-hmm. And it's like, I think that's the battle as an entrepreneur, is to continue to go through, fight the urge to hold on to something because you can't see the future of what it would look like without you holding on to it. Mm-hmm. Trust that it'll be fine, and then push through. Yeah. And then do it over and over again.
Yes. It's, you literally are speaking to me. I'm like in that right now. It's just like, it's over and over. It's a wild thing. You think like hiring the first couple of employees, it's like this huge deal. And then it's like, the next thing you know, there's all these other things. And it's like, it feels like the same thing. And I think, I don't know if it was Drew who was on your podcast, but he was just like, Drew Sanaki, I think he was like, it's just as hard to run a small business as it is a big business, Yeah. So it's like, I was like, wow. I was like, man, like that's crazy. Cause like, it probably is. And I'm sure he's absolutely right. And like, it's just, it's such a repetitive, like more of the same situation, but like you have to keep evolving along the way. Otherwise you're going to get stuck, and we've been stuck at BoomBoom before, and that's because of me, and I know that. So it's always a nice reminder. And that's another reason why I'm trying to get out and like talk to more founders. It's like the more founders and like owners I'm talking to, I'm like, okay, like this is all normal and is happening to everybody. And like, you gotta figure your way around it. You gotta just keep pushing. That's the only way to do it.
I've been reading a good book called, The Big Leap. Have you read that book? It's by Gay Hendricks.
No, I haven't.
One of the big premises of the book is this thing called upper limit problem. And I think what we're talking about with the feeling of not being able to get to the next level, or like having to take that like level of trust, I think what he would describe it as is the upper limit problem, where it's like let's say things are going really well in many parts of your life, and like you can't imagine that it could go better than this. Mm-hmm. So you end up like sabotaging a part of your life because you can't imagine your body's like resisting on taking to
Yeah.
the next level. I think about it like with maybe the business is going really well, but you're sabotaging your own personal health because you can't imagine a reality where it's too good if the business is going well and your health is going really well.
Yeah. Yep. And I think one of the things to help kind of clear some of that and like work through that is like having some sort of like daily meditation practice. Like I swear,
Yeah.
like there's been periods of time where like I've kind of fallen off the wagon and it's like we were moving and this and that. And like it's next thing you know, it's been 3 months and like I haven't like sat down in the morning and like given my mind like 10, 15, 20 minutes to just like be. And every time I get back in that routine, I swear things just become more fluid, more clear. Like the decision making is like it just happens and like it makes sense. So, there's something to that as well. Most people probably listening to this hopefully have some sort of meditative practice in their life if they're running a business because it definitely helps.
What do you use? Do you have anything that you use? Is it guided, unguided? Is it just you sitting in any resources for people?
I've used apps. I've done the transcendental meditation course. I just sit there and I basically just have a mantra, silent mantra that it just is kind of, and then like probably after, depending on how relaxed I am after like 5-10 minutes, you're just like those 5-10 minutes turn into 20 and it feels like 30 seconds, and so every day is a little bit different, but I try to stick with that. And then at nighttime, I'll sometimes do like something guided, more of like a like nighttime story thing on like Calm. Chelsea and I will listen to one and then we'll just like pass out. And next thing you know, it's like 4 a.m. and my phone's like by my face.
I have never been able to fall asleep to one of those bedtime stories. I've tried, but I can't do it. I don't know what it is. They're relaxing, but I can't do it. I can't fall asleep.
Hilarious. Yeah, Chelsea's the same way. She's like, it either works instantly on Chelsea or it just like sparks anxiety. And she's like, I can't listen to this. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And yeah, my wife Carly, she can fall asleep like that. It's like no matter what, any plane, train, bus, car. I'm always so jealous. Well, it's been awesome, Johnny. Really fun to connect and hear how things are going. What kind of my last question for you? What is I don't know if you have anything recently that you found that's been helpful for you, like resource wise, maybe a book, podcast, anything that you've read or listened to or found recently that's been helpful on your entrepreneurial journey?
Yeah, that's a good question, man. I think, for me, like for a while was trying to like figure out, like, we knew like Boom Boom was this like cool product. We knew people liked it, but we're really trying to like put the flag in the ground of like, why is Boom Boom needed? And I read the book Breath by James Nestor, and I was just like, dang, like, I've kind of instinctively have like known some of this stuff just like by using our product and knowing I feel better when I breathe through my nose. But like to read that book and then be like, holy, like, whoa, like we have this crazy big opportunity in front of us with having this really unique item to help people breathe through their nose. And that combined with the ENT that Chelsea works with, telling me basically the same thing. He gives Boom Boom out to every single one of his patients. And he said it quite simply. He said, John, love your product. I give it to all my patients because it reminds them to breathe through their nose. I'm just like, wow, like it's so simple, And so that book, I suggest everybody read it. It's
fantastic.
It's pretty wild. And it just is like eye-opening. And I think, there's a lot of very simple things you can do to like drastically improve your health just through breathing consciously through your nose consistently. So I'd say that. And then, podcast wise, I just love listening to other entrepreneur stories, like how I built this or even watching Shark Tank, like I love the journey. I love hearing about the journey. It's so relatable, like you may not relate to like the business or the product, but like the story is the same. Most of the time it's like the same story. And so it's always just a very nice reminder for me, like as long as you're passionate about what you're doing and you're of service and you are providing a great product that people like, I mean, I'm just going to keep going, and it's always a nice reminder to hear of other people's journeys along the way, especially the ones that, go big and have these big exits, which is obviously a dream, I think, for most entrepreneurs. So
you've been on Shark Tank. Last question for you. What is something people don't know about Shark Tank, behind the scenes or being on Shark Tank?
Honestly, like for me and Chelsea, what I didn't, maybe it's just us, but when we left the tank, like we got an offer, we turned down the offer because there was no way we were going to agree to whatever, was suggested. But like, I remember the feeling walking out, being very sure of myself, being like, that was the absolute right decision, 100%, to then like 12, 24 hours later, like waking up and literally not having any clue what happened in the room. Like, I'm not even kidding you. I did not remember for a good 48 to 72 hours. It was like a mental block. And after about 3 days, it started to come back to me. And I felt okay again because I was like, I don't know what happened. Like, are we going to look like complete idiots on TV? Like, there's always that chance. You don't know how they're going to edit it. I don't even remember what I said. Like,
yeah,
so I think that most people don't realize, like, and maybe some people don't have the nerves, but it was one of those moments that you will never forget. So that was anybody who wants to go on, just keep that in mind.
We'll put a link to your guys' episodes in our your episode in the show notes, because you did a great job showing up on camera, and you and Chelsea is so funny.
Hilarious.
Knowing Chelsea and then seeing like her like excitement on the show is just so good. Hey, thank you so much for hopping on here with me, talking. Continued success for you this upcoming year. If somebody's interested in connecting with you after the show, where would you direct them?
You can find me on LinkedIn or on Instagram, Johnny_BoomBoom. Those are probably, hit me on the DM. That'd probably be the most responsive way to get a hold of me. Trying to get better on LinkedIn too, which has been a process.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you, and I will talk to you soon.
All right, cheers. Thanks.